Well, Howard is looking up a completely different issue. He's not interested in Hebrew Matthew. He's interested in the name Yhovah in the New Testament. As we know, the name Yhovah doesn't appear even one time in the Greek New Testament. And so he was looking at different Hebrew versions to see, okay, where do they have the name Yhovah? And as he's comparing Dutele and Munster, he sees that they're basically the same version with slight differences. But Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew is something completely different. It is not the same text as Dutele and Munster. It is what he became convinced was an original Hebrew composition rather than a translation. Now, we should point out that many translations have Yhovah in them. That is, they're translations from the Greek into Hebrew. And I just want to pull up here one of the things that we were talking about we wanted to bring, which was the Delitzsch's version. So I have here on my computer in the Accordance Bible program, I have Delitzsch's Hebrew translation. You can also get it online. You can download it for free in a number of different websites. Delitzsch's Hebrew New Testament, Matthew 2:13. Let's start with the Greek. So the Greek mentions Angelos Kuriou, which is the angel of the Lord. Angel of Lord. And then Delitzsch has Malach Yhovah, Yhovah with the full vowels, by the way. And Delitzsch tells you he's translating from Greek. We know he's translating from Greek. So why would he put Yhovah in this verse when the Greek had Lord, right? Why didn't he write Malach Adonai?
Right.
Any thoughts on that, Keith?
I don't have any thoughts on that, Nehemia, because I'll be honest with you. I'm like George Howard when I started looking at this and saying, wait. And you're the first person that brought this to me about the little hey with the apostrophe. And I mean, every time I see it, I get stopped in my tracks.
So that's an important point there, that a rabbi who's copying the Gospel of Matthew it would be very surprising for him to write Yud He Vav He.
Right.
The rabbis, they'll have a synagogue, and on the front of the synagogue will be a verse from the Bible. And usually in the verse, it'll say Hey with an apostrophe, which stands for Hashem. Or in some periods, they wrote Yud Vav Yud, or 3 Yuds or 2 Yuds. And in Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew, they usually, in the manuscripts, we find the Hey with the apostrophe. And we all know, everybody who studies any Hebrew manuscript, any modern Hebrew text, the Hey stands for Hashem. And that Hashem, it means the name, and it represents Yud He Vav He. And again, even when they're quoting the Tanakh and it's in a synagogue, a holy place, from their perspective, and they put the name, they don't put Yud He Vav He. Some synagogues do, especially Sephardic synagogues, but most synagogues that I've ever been to do not. They put just the He, when in the verse they're quoting from the Tanakh, it has Yud He Vav He. Now, I'm looking here in Salkinson Ginsburg's translation. Salkinson and Ginsburg were these 2 Jewish converts to Christianity in the 19th century. And what's interesting is to compare their translation with Delitzsch. Delitzsch was a Christian, born a Christian Gentile, but he was a great Hebrew linguist. Ginsburg was the great scholar of the Masorah. To this day, he's considered the great scholar of the Masorah, but he was a Jew converted to Christianity. And so it's interesting to see the comparison. Both of them tell us up front. They tell us straight out. The purpose of their translation was to present the New Testament in a way that it would be very familiar to Jews. In other words, they wanted it to sound like the text of the Tanakh, the text of the Old Testament, because that's what Jews would read and say, wow, this sounds biblical. So Delitzsch, who was a great linguist of the Tanakh, he very consciously mimicked his translation of the New Testament after the Old Testament Hebrew. Sometimes he couldn't do it because there'd be a word that doesn't appear in the Tanakh. But he did his best to do it. So Matthew 2:13 in Salkinson and Ginsburg. Salkinson translated it, but he died before he finished, so Ginsburg finished it. It says in verse 13, Vahi belechtam vayera malach Yehovah el Yosef. So both Delitzsch and Salkinson and Ginsburg have Malach Yehovah, the angel of Yehovah, whereas in the Greek it says the angel of the Lord, and they could have written Malach Adonai, Malach HaAdon, which is literally the angel of the Lord, but they wrote Yehovah. I think it's really interesting.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting because, and again, this is happening as we're dealing with this in real time. So can we just ask a question? Why would Howard be interested in this topic? Can we throw that
So,
out?
so this is in a sense, a mystery that the New Testament does not have the name of Yhovah even one time in the Greek.
Mm-hmm.
And the mystery is, why not? It's kind of it's kind of strange.
Mm-hmm.
And one answer is, well, by this time for 200 years, the Jews had not spoken the name. That's one explanation.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, what happened is scholars looked in the Septuagint, and the Septuagint never has the name Yhovah. The Septuagint's the ancient Greek translation of the Torah,
Mm-hmm.
and later other books were
You
translated.
mean
But originally
the
it's
one
just
that they
the
were
Torah.
reading didn't have the name?
What's that?
You're saying the Septuagint that they were reading didn't have the name.
Right. Well,
Yes.
hold on, I'll get to that.
Yes.
So the Septuagint does not have the name. Whenever it has Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in the Hebrew, it has Kurios, Lord, and then sometimes Theos, God. It does not have Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And so they decided based on that, well, we know the Septuagint was translated in 250 BC, approximately under the reign of King Ptolemy of Egypt, when he was creating the Library of Alexandria. He wanted every book in the world. So he brought 70 rabbis or 72 rabbis, according to one version, and they translated it, we're told, identically, even though they were in different rooms, supposedly. Long story short, if the Septuagint doesn't have it, the conclusion was people didn't speak the name in 250 BC, and by the time of the New Testament, sure, they read Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in their Hebrew text, but they pronounced it Adonai. That was the assumption, and still is for many scholars. However, what's come out lately is that there isn't a single manuscript of the Septuagint that predates the year 150 that has Lord, that has Kurios in place of Yehovah. In every single one of them, it has one of two things. It has either, the most common one, is it'll have Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in Hebrew characters in the Greek text of the Septuagint, or it will have Ya'o in one instance, which is Yota, Alpha, Omega. The letter is pronounced Ya'o, which presumably is equivalent of the Hebrew Yeho, which is the prefix form. 4Q20 in the Dead Sea Scrolls has Ya'o in place of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. All the other manuscripts from around the middle of the 2nd century AD of the Septuagint have Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh either in Paleo Hebrew characters or regular Hebrew characters. And the takeaway from this is that the original Septuagint didn't have Lord, didn't have Kurios in place of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. It had the letters Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Origen, who's the church father, who comes along and he wants to determine what is the most accurate text of the Tanakh, of the Old Testament in Greek. He studies the manuscripts of the Septuagint, and he tells us the most accurate manuscripts of the Septuagint, they contain the name of God in Hebrew characters.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is this. This is the $64,000 question. Did the original New Testament written in Greek by Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, etc., did they have Lord? And especially in the context when they're quoting Old Testament verses where it says Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, did they have Lord, Kurios, or did they have Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in Paleo-Hebrew characters? Now, we found manuscripts of the Old Testament where it has Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in Hebrew characters in the Greek text, meaning you're reading Greek left to right, and all of a sudden you get a right to left word, which is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh.
Right.
For example, Nachal Hever, they have the 12 minor prophets from Nachal Hever in the Dead Sea Scrolls. That has actually written by two different scribes, because you can tell from the handwriting, there are two different scribes who wrote Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in Paleo-Hebrew characters. You have the Papyrus Fuad, and you have other ones. The point is that this was the question that Howard was asking, and many scholars have asked. Did the original New Testament have Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh? Maybe they pronounced it Lord, right? That's a possibility. But what they wrote in the Septuagint was Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Did the New Testament have that, or did it have Kurios? That's the $64,000 question scholars have been studying for decades. And Howard said, you know what? Let me look at these Hebrew versions to see when they translated it from Greek, where did they put Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh? And then he had heard, wait a minute, these priests, one a Protestant, one a Catholic, that is Munster the Protestant, Dutele the Catholic, they found a manuscript of Matthew among the Jews, and he looks at that, and then he compares it to Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew. He's like, wow, Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew is really different from the Greek in many places. And sounds like it was written in Hebrew according to him.